And they're firing live rounds.
Firing live rounds.
Is anyone else bringing water into Gaza?
No.
No water.
No.
Good people don't immediately deflect in that way and accuse their critics of working for a terror group.
Tucker Carlson recently revealed that Israel's war crimes in Gaza are undeniable at this point. In this interview, where he brought back Anthony Aguilar, a whistleblower that worked with the GHF to distribute food in Gaza, where he details some of the atrocities that he's seen beyond what he had already described to Tucker. This is a very interesting interview. It's sad and twisted, but it is the truth, and we need more of that. So let's check it out. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
You mentioned a food distribution site where there were 30 dead bodies.
That was, it was 20.
20.
Yes, that was secure distribution site number 3 on the 16th of July.
How do you kill 20 people? Was there like a revolt of the people? Do they go after the IDF, or how does that happen?
So
that's a lot of people.
I was not physically there. However, what GHF put out in their press release was that it was a stampede. It wasn't away from the site. It wasn't near the site. It was on the site. It was smack dab in the middle of the distribution site where starving human beings are collecting food. It was a stampede. That stampede killed 20 people. Now, they say that one was stabbed. I've never seen any documentation of that. But 20 were killed.
So if you fire live ammo, was there live ammo being fired?
Absolutely. As quote unquote, again, even the lawyer for UG Solutions who spoke against me said that Aguilar is a liar. Though our forces may shoot warning shots at their feet and over their heads, we don't shoot at them. Well, thank you, Mr. Contract Attorney, for admitting to a war crime on the record. Because shooting at an unarmed population, targeting, shooting at them, shooting in their direction intentionally to control them is specifically prohibited in the protocols of the Geneva Convention. So thank you, Mr. Attorney, for putting that on the record.
When people get...
Yeah, and by the way, you wonder why there's a stampede. Yeah, I wonder why there are stampedes there. They went from 400 food distribution centers to 4. And the people are flushed down in the south of Gaza. And there's a 3-month-long blockade instituted by Israel such that other aid can't flow in outside of what comes in through the GHF. This while you have people like Itamar Ben-Gvir that says we shouldn't have any aid go into Gaza because all those people are our enemy. As Moshe Feiglin says, hey, you know, every Palestinian child is our enemy. As people in the United States, like Brian Mass, say, there's no such thing as an innocent Palestinian. Gee, I wonder why there's a stampede. You've kind of created that, Israel. And by the way, the U.S. is bankrolling it. It doesn't threaten to withhold any of that aid. And, you know, hey, I'm here to praise Mr. Aguilar, who I think is redeemable morally for putting this out there for us to see for real, the truth for once.
Shot to death or trampled at a distribution site. What happens to the bodies? Does Gaza Humanitarian Foundation bury the bodies?
Oh, no. No, Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, Safe Reach Solutions, UG Solutions, we don't have anything to do with it. The IDF will come in, collect up the bodies, and or the IDF will allow the International Red Cross Red Crescent to come in and take the bodies, in this case, from site number 3 to the Al Nasser Hospital. And what I find interesting in that very instance, that same day, July 16th, 20 people killed on site 3. GHF even put it in a release, sadly to report that 20 Palestinians or 20 civilians were killed on site. Hamas did it. Hamas started the stampede. But then when the surgeons in Nasser Hospital said, we received 30 dead bodies 20 dead bodies from this site, IDF and GHF said they're lying. It's like, you just said that 20 people were killed on your site. Now the doctors are coming forward and saying, yes, we did receive 20 trampled dead bodies. And now you're saying they didn't?
Yeah, Hamas is always the scapegoat for anything Israel does. A lot of people that are hardcore Zionists bankrolling this genocide just put everything on Hamas. It's Hamas's fault that there's been a single death in Gaza, they say. Not the fact that, hey, it's Israel's vastly disproportionate response to October 7th, the death of about 1,000 people, that's lasted almost 2 years at this point. of genocide and massacre and mass murder, and as he just detailed, war crimes. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, Anthony Aguilar is just about as heroic as Julian Assange and Edward Snowden at this point, because Assange and Snowden both exposed the truth about U.S. war crimes and the U.S. surveillance state. And now Aguilar is spilling this despite the fact that Israel's trying to do everything they can to stop it. They're stopping the journalism going on there. There's an embargo against international journalists going in there. So it takes whistleblowers at great risk to themselves, by the way, because he has suffered a lot of ramifications for this personally. You know, he's basically being accosted, not for what he's saying. They don't address his claims, but they're just calling him a fraud.
Hamas trample the people to death.
The claim is that on site number 3 that day, Hamas incited a stampede.
How?
That is absolutely ludicrous. Site number 3 on the 28th of May. Site number 3 had a very similar situation. Site number 3 is, each site's kind of got its own flavor, if you will. Each site's kind of like its own arena. Site number 3, because it's right in the middle of between site number 2 and an IDF base, it's very canalized when the foot traffic from the Morag corridor comes south into the site. It's very congested. It's very tight. The exit is very tight, and the exit is also very constrained with debris, just mounds of rubble. So when the people are leaving, there's really nowhere for them to go except continuing to be pushed through this small exit. It is the perfect setting for a stampede of human beings. It's if it was created for that.
Yeah, this is exactly what Israel's trying to do and the conditions they're setting up. Like, what would tell you that there wouldn't be a stampede when there's only 4 food distribution sites? You're shutting out all other external forms of food distribution and aid. And by the way, you wanted the United States to bomb the Houthis for a month back in March because they dared to try to give the Palestinians aid. That's what you're getting here. They've set these conditions up, and Hamas is just the easy scapegoat, I guess. We should just, put all the deaths on Hamas, despite the fact that there is a genocide and ethnic cleansing campaign going on against the Gazans. And thankfully, like former Green Beret Aguilar here, we're learning the truth. Again, they've done everything they can to suppress the truth. This is a war of information. Israel has started to lose their war of information, their propaganda war, Hasbara, which justifies the atrocities in Gaza. And while this is happening, do any prominent senators or the president or, the Secretary of Defense or Secretary of State weigh in on this in a negative way? Really not much at all. Not whatsoever. They don't threaten to withdraw aid to Israel while this is happening. Certainly not. Just continue on. Israel's doing this on their own. The same thing they said about the war with Iran at first, even though we know that the U.S. government was intricately tied into these schemes, as they always are.
On the 28th of May, site number 3.
Bottleneck.
It is a bottleneck surrounded by razor wire and surrounded by fighting positions where IDF have machine guns.
And they're firing live rounds.
When you hear UG Solutions or anyone talk about a quote unquote warning shot, there's no such thing as a warning shot.
I've never heard of that before. What does that mean?
The United States military doesn't use it because firing a bullet is firing a bullet. Escalation of force would be, for an example, if I was in Baghdad as a combatant, an actual under Title 10 authority under the United States Constitution, fighting as a belligerent in war. I can't just walk up to somebody and be like, oh, that looks like Al-Qaeda, I'm going to shoot him. There has to be a threat. And the process of that threat, to where unless you are engaged in active combat, you feel a threat, it's typically you have signage like, hey, don't go past this point, right? Then you shout, show, and then you shoot. And when you shoot to kill.
Yeah, and they don't really seem to care. There's no such thing as a warning shot as what he says, but they're still firing shots over the heads of these people. This is on record, and he's right. That is against the Geneva Conventions. It's not like they really care about that or any kind of treaty that would subdue the worst excesses of the American and Israeli war machine. Never a care at all about that because of how deeply the Israel lobby has its claws in the U.S. president, in U.S. Congress, etc. That's why it was particularly heroic for Marjorie Taylor Greene to come out here a few days ago and say, yeah, this is a genocide and it's certainly not America first. When my constituents voted for me, it was for America first, and that doesn't mean entitle Israel to the entire U.S. Treasury.
You're not shooting a warning shot. Warning shot is such a misnomer. It's not a thing. Bullets are
these
bullets.
5.56 rounds?
They are not only 5.56 rounds. They are 5.56 M855 green tip steel core armor piercing rounds.
Yep. So what's the lethal distance of a round like that fired flat? Like how far does it travel?
Oh, well, considering like if I was on an M4 range, I'm shooting for a qualification, I'm shooting out to 300 meters at the furthest pop-up target. Maximum effective range with that M4 is out to 500, but out to 800 to 1,000 in terms of where the bullet travels with its velocity.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, very far.
Yeah, just think of that, how far this can go to deal damage. And at different times in this interview with Tucker, I've seen the full-length clip, he talks about how he and the people he worked with didn't even have to qualify with their weapons. These are defense contractors, really not defense contractors. He was contractor for working with the GHF. They didn't even have to qualify with these weapons, and these were automatic weapons too. So for all the gun grabbers that complain about the mass killing potential of automatic weapons, a lot of them don't seem to have that same qualm when it comes to shooting them off at innocent Palestinians trying to gather aid at aid sites. I just think it's so ridiculous. You wouldn't even have to qualify with those arms, even though, Aguilar has a lot of experience in that. He is a former, Green Beret. So absolutely. But this is just a recipe for disaster. They're setting these things up for killing, for stampedes, for, mob interactions that can lead to mass killings. And that's why we've seen over 1,000 people dead from the IDF at these aid sites over the last few months. They're laying down the foundations for this to be an inevitability, and that's the major problem here. If they allowed outside aid and shut down that stupid aid blockade, we wouldn't be in this place. But now, I wish this was asked by all journalists so that the U.S. president and U.S. government would have to justify this or try to justify it, because it's not justifiable.
So if you're firing thousands of rounds,
yes,
even if you're firing over people's heads, like where do those bullets go?
Where are those bullets going? So
what's the answer?
When UG Solutions says we fire towards the sea is a big place. And you know what the sea crashes into? A beach. And you know what's along that beach on the coastal road in Gaza? Hundreds of thousands of civilians. So when UG Solutions says that our men fire into the air or towards the beach, well, thank you again, Mr. Attorney, for just verifying to the world that you are shooting bullets into a crowd of unarmed civilians, because what lines the entire coast from north to south of the Mediterranean Sea and Gaza? Thousands of human beings.
Yeah, they let the mask drop when they agree to admit to these war crimes, and that's what he's getting at here. And it's just atrocious. It's absurd.
So you passed out food. Your job was to provide security at sites where they were passing out food, but you have said that they didn't pass out water because it was too expensive. How does that work exactly? Is there a lot of water in Gaza? And the food you're passing out requires water to cook it, right? It was like dried beans and corn and stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of like your kid turned 16 and they walk outside and you got the big bow on the Pontiac and it's like, happy birthday. And you give them the keys and it's got no gas in it. Real jerk move, right? So to give people food that requires water to cook it and then give them no water. And in order to get to the food, they have to walk 8 kilometers and then walk 8 kilometers back to their house to cook it. And you give them no water. It's so inhumane and evil that it can only be deliberate.
Yeah, just think about that. That would emaciate people just from the sweat and losing calories from walking or running to these sites, and then there's stampedes and you're not receiving water. The inhumanity is striking and it's impossible to ignore. These things are just too glaring to oversee, but he's laying it out for us, and I can tell the indignation in his voice dealing with this because he has seen truly inhumane things in his line of work. And man, God bless him for trying to do what he can and, doing the right thing by telling the truth about this when so many people in the Western media won't do that. And thank you for Tucker for having it.
Is there a lot of water in Gaza?
There's none. I mean, other than cisterns from rainwater, remnants of old wells that may be still operating at a very low level. But in terms of municipal type water, fresh water, tap water, absolutely not.
So is anyone else bringing water into Gaza?
No.
No water.
No. That's why if you saw on the news just today, and this is not just in Western media, this is in Israeli news, N12, Channel 13. I watch all the Israeli breaking news on my phone. I'm just into it now. And the new or the now realized danger is that they're critically low and running out of water, which should not surprise anybody. How would they be getting it? The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation isn't providing any.
Yeah, and remember, there's 4 aid stations. None of them are providing water, and they need it to cook the food that they're distributed by the GHF. Well, I have a good solution. Stop blaming Hamas for all your problems. Stop blaming the UN even. I'm not the biggest fan of the UN. I'm not a fan of global entities of any kind. But if you knock down those barriers that you've created, Israel, to prevent food and aid and water from flowing through, that would do the world a great amount of service if you're really not trying to ethnically cleanse these Palestinians. But Imitar Ben-Gvir already allowed the mask to drop because we know many of them don't want any of these people to have aid whatsoever. I think he essentially likened aid to a threat. We've talked about that in other videos, and it can't escape notice that at the same time that's happening, Israel Katz, the offense minister, he's called the defense minister, wants there to be a concentration zone where Rafah once stood, where now 80% of the buildings are essentially destroyed and in ruins, and they use terms like transfer and relocation. This is a concentration camp in future Greater Israel after they occupy Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu has already said the decision has been made, we're going to occupy Gaza. This is what you're getting. This is the Greater Israel Project and the fruits that flow from it, financed from the U.S. It's totally criminal, totally absurd, the most inhumane policies imaginable, and very few in the West speak out about it.
Did you bring this up?
We brought this up on the very first day, and not just myself, other contractors, other people that have a conscience that were like, okay, I see this child or this woman breaking into a box of food, and it's all dried goods, no prepared goods, all dried goods that require water to make, that require effort to make. There's no water. And we asked that. And we were told, well, the IDF said no to water. Well, who's in charge here? I mean, I thought we were doing the humanitarian aid. Well, we are, but we're not going to push back on it because water would be 3 times more expensive per truckload than we can bring in, equal to that of 3 trucks of food. And more food is better than limiting that for water. And I'm like, I think someone that was actually educated in humanitarian assistance and providing humanitarian aid, and someone that was a nutritionist that was well-versed in feeding people.
Just think about that. They have enough money, or I should say supplies from the United States, to drop bombs in and throughout Gaza for the last 22 months, but they don't have enough money to provide water. Just think about that. Let that sink in. Let that show the depravity of the war machine that the U.S. facilitates and is beholden to Israel because of the Israel lobby, and how deeply the claws of AIPAC get into our government. It's just ghastly. It's dreadful. It's almost impossible to take this in without lashing out emotionally against it, because it's just so sad and depraved. This is the kind of policy that, supports mass atrocities. And it has there for 22 months.
Would probably disagree with that. I would disagree with that. Water? In the United States Army, if you're in the field and conducting combat operations, I mean, not having water is a sin. You don't go without water. So us providing no water for food that has to be cooked with water is almost like a slap in the face. It's dehumanizing.
Has Johnny Moore addressed this?
No, because Johnny Moore won't answer any questions. And to be fair, I don't think he doesn't answer it because he's a bad guy. I think he doesn't answer it because he doesn't know. He knows nothing.
I'd be willing to take, I think it's a very charitable view. When I heard him suggest that anyone who criticizes him and his, quote, life-saving work is working for Hamas, that's when I began to wonder if he was really a good guy. Because good people don't immediately deflect in that way and accuse their critics of working for a terror group. There are legitimate questions. You don't have to be a Hamas sympathizer to ask.
Yeah, no kidding. And that's, indicative of every kind of criticism that people levy toward Israel or U.S. aid to Israel. That's always the rebuttal. You've just chosen the side of Hamas. You just sympathize with Hamas. You're a terrorist sympathizer. Well, what's this reign of terror in the last 22 months that Israel has rained down upon the poor, defenseless Gazans? 99.9% or something to that effect are not Hamas, by the way. I'm sorry. It doesn't work when you say those dead babies that get pulled from the rubble. Those 3-year-old children sometimes that look completely emaciated and malnourished. Those are not members of Hamas. That's so absurd. And just for those that didn't know, for clarification, Johnny Moore is the director of the GHF, this organization that is tasked with a monopoly on providing aid in Gaza in these 4 aid stations where, again, there used to be 400, and now there's, in addition to the normal blockade that Israel's had against Gaza since 2007, I believe, this is an aid blockade, a special aid blockade that they've imposed for the last 3 months. And, there's all sorts of deflections about why these atrocities are happening, the deaths, the murder, the inability to distribute food in a viable and effective way, from, hey, the UN is to blame to Hamas is to blame. But no, it's never the fault of the Israeli authorities, that's for sure. But I'm so proud of people like Anthony Aguilar. He is strikingly reminiscent of Edward Snowden and Julian Assange, like I said before, in exposing the most vile parts of humanity that we see from government and government secrecy and government crimes committed under the veil of secrecy that we never get to hear, the truth about for the most part without them. He is a hero, and they've thrown everything they can against this guy. They've said, hey, he must be receiving tons of money from Hamas. They've said you weren't even at the distribution sites in the field when clearly he was, and they even used a lot of his film and his pictures in the materials that they were distributing to show status updates about what was happening there in those sites and in those moments. They've said stuff like, well, no, he was really complimentary of the GHF when he wasn't. In the text messages or signal messages that they've thrown out there on the internet to try to accuse him of this, like, oh, you never complained about this. You were, glowing in your support for the GHF. He wasn't. He was actually talking to people that were his subordinates under him, working underneath him, and not for the GHF when he was a leader. And he said, hey, being a leader means when you complain upward to people above you in the hierarchy, not the underlings, the men who actually are trying to do a good job, keep these people fed, and keep this humanitarian crisis curtailed to the most extent possible. He did complain to his higher-ups. This is well documented. He's talked about it on Tucker. This guy's a hero. They're trying to rake him over the coals. They're not talking about the veracity of his claims almost at all. In any of these attacks, it's all personal. They're all going after him as a person. And, I hate to say that did work. Cancel culture in the past, going after people for telling the truth. They got Snowden to be exiled, and now he's in Russia. They got Assange to live in exile for a while in London. And that's where we're at. Ultimately, it doesn't help these people to put their own personal lives at risk, but he's done that to a huge extent to tell the truth. And there's no bigger heroes in the world than the people that do that. So I commend him. I commend Tucker for having him. These truths need to come out. The U.S. needs to stop bankrolling this genocide in Gaza. The world can't take it any longer, and I don't know what it's going to take. All I know is younger people more and more are not having it as much as older people when it comes to the Israel first mentality. And you're seeing that not only in the activist world, but in younger conservative circles now at Turning Point USA, them cheering more for Dave Smith and Tucker Carlson than they did for people like Josh Hammer. That's really telling. So that's where we're at, but I want to hear from what you guys say. What do you think about these revelations? Let me know in the comments below. Is this a dire situation? where do we go from here, and what is the end point? What's going to be the end? Is there going to be an end to the Palestinian people? Is the state of Israel's future in question because of this? Let me know in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Tucker also. Really appreciate him for this interview. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you'll become a member of my channel. And as thanks for doing that, I'll give you access to all my videos before they go live on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.